tied back, hands washed, apron on, pan ready, ingredients ready. It's time for the very first week of the Twinkl Plate Up. So welcome to week one of the Twinkl Homemade Plate Up. I am so excited to be cooking along with you all again. Week one is perfect pasta week where we will be cooking spaghetti bolognese. So before we get started with the cooking, I'm going to run through all of the ingredients that you need to get ready. So first of all, you're going to need 2 onions and 1 clove of garlic. You're also going to need 90 grams of mushrooms, a tin of chopped tomatoes, some tomato puree, and you are also going to need some Worcestershire sauce, and also some salt, pepper, and also some olive oil or other cooking oil in order to cook with. The other thing that you're going to need is you're going to need 300 millilitres of stock, and what stock that is entirely up to you. You can make it with a stock cube, you can use vegetable stock, or you can use beef stock if you're going for a meaty version. It's entirely up to you, but make that stock up in advance. You're going to need some oregano or some mixed herbs or other herbs that you particularly like, that you think would be nice in this sauce. And then you are going to need 500 grams of some protein sauce. Now, we are using meat substitute mince. You could use corn mince, you could use beef mince, you could use pork mince, you could use turkey mince, you could use a mixture of the different types of mince and play around with the flavours to see what works for you. But those are the ingredients, so let's get cooking. Going to get our vegetables ready so that when we start cooking they're all to hand. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to prepare our onions. Now you need to finely chop your 2 onions. If you are wanting to develop your chefing skills and you would like some pro chef tips on how to chop an onion so that you can take those skills on past these 6 weeks to use in the kitchen, then stay tuned, because later in the video I'm going to be showing you exactly how to do that. But what I'm going to do first of all to start with is I'm going to chop my 2 onions. So as you can see, I've chopped all my onions. I'm now going to prepare my garlic. The easiest way is to just chop the end off and press down slightly with your knife, and then hopefully your garlic should peel off really, really easily. In week 5, I'm going to show you some top chefing tips as to how to prepare a garlic, but you'll have to stay tuned to that. I have got a grater, fine grater, because I'm going to grate my garlic. If you've got a garlic press, then do press the garlic too. But basically what you want is your garlic to be a nice fine consistency. And finally, the last vegetables that we need to get prepared are our 90 grams of mushrooms. Now don't feel that you have to perfectly measure these, because actually slightly more mushrooms isn't really going to make a huge bit of difference, but we're going to just slice up those mushrooms nice and thinly, being really careful to keep the knife away from your fingers. If you are struggling a little bit with your chopping, don't forget to ask a grown-up to help you, because knives can be very, very sharp. And so that means that we have, I'm just going to chop my last mushroom because that's around 90 grams. We now have all of our ingredients ready, and that's so important because it means that you're not partially cooking and then having to stop to prepare more vegetables. It's always worth reading ahead in the recipe so that you know exactly what you have to do. We're going to put some oil into our pan. Now I use a spray oil. You're going to need about a tablespoon, but I tend to just use a spray bottle because I find that it actually distributes the oil really, really easily. And then you're going to put your cooker on and you're going to heat up that pan so that it is nice and warm. Now you don't want to go too hot, because what we are going to start off with is we are going to start off by softening our onions, and you don't want to have too high a heat, because if you have too high a heat, the onions will catch and then your dish will taste bitter. So my onions are in, as you can hear they're sizzling away, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep stirring them and I am going to fry them until they are nice and soft, which should take around 4 to 5 minutes. So now my onions are nice and soft, it's time for the mince. If you are using beef mince or pork mince or turkey mince, then you're going to need to fry it until it's brown. If you are using some sort of alternative protein sauce, then what you need to do is you need to double check what the ingredients require you to do. So some of them come frozen and require you to sort of heat them until that they're warm through. Some of them you obviously get in a refrigerated packet. So you need to, at this point, look at what your instructions require you to do. For my protein sauce, which is a meat alternative similar to corn, it's just to heat it through, which is what I'm going to do now. So if you're using meat as soon as it's browned, or if you are using a meat-free alternative when it's started to heat through, it's then time to add your mushrooms and your garlic. And then give it a stir to make sure that the garlic is well distributed and your mushrooms are in the pan and starting to cook. It smells absolutely delicious. I love the smell of cooking garlic. So you're just going to zhuzh it around the pan a little bit until the mushrooms are starting to soften. And now what we're going to do is we are going to add our herbs. So I'm going to use oregano, but it's entirely up to you. And you need 1 teaspoon. And you're just going to sprinkle that in. And then give it a nice stir. And the heat again, you will find, as you fry it around the pan, will release the delicious smell of that oregano or whatever herbs it is that you're using. And then finally what we're going to do is we are going to add our tomatoes into the pan along with our stock and our Worcestershire sauce and our tomato puree. So we're going to start with our tin of tomatoes. What I always do is I put a little bit of water in the tin so that I can rinse it and get all of that tomato goodness. At this point you might want to turn the heat down low whilst you're adding these ingredients, because sometimes the sauce can spit a little bit, so you need to be super careful. Then we're going to add the stock. Then we are going to add our tomato puree, and we need a tablespoon of tomato puree. And then finally our Worcestershire sauce, and again we need a tablespoon of our Worcestershire sauce. It takes quite a while to come out of the pot. And then you're going to give it a nice stir so that everything's combined. And then what we're going to do is we are going to look for a simmer. Now a simmer is very different to a boil. A simmer is where the liquid and the sauce is making kind of a blip, 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 blip sort of sound. So it's not lots and lots of bubbles and kind of a boil like you would if you were cooking a pan of water to put some pasta in, for example. But what you're looking for is you're going to adjust the heat until you can see the pan slightly blipping, is what I would say. So blip, 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 blip. And that is what a simmer is. So we're going to bring it up to a simmer, and then when it is up to a simmer, you're going to leave it for 30 minutes for all of the flavours to combine. Do stir it frequently to make sure that it's not catching on the bottom, and we'll come back in 30 minutes and see what it looks like. Simmering away for 30 minutes. As you can see now, it is nice and thick and absolutely delicious. Now is the time to season your food, because you need to taste it before you can actually season anything. So we're going to just take a small amount of the sauce and give it a bit of a blow because it will be very hot. And from that you should be able to work out how much seasoning you need. Do keep tasting, so putting a small amount in, and then do keep tasting it so that you're sure that you have the exact amount of seasoning. So I'm going to season what I think my dish needs, but that's part of being a top chef, is being careful how you season your food. Remember, if you put too much in, you can't take it back. So I'm going to have another taste. I think that needs a teeny tiny bit more salt, and I think it's perfect. So what you can do now is you can, if you're having some spaghetti or some other pasta shapes, you can put your pasta water on to boil and cook your pasta. If you want to be a top chef, do go and check out our pack, because we have an extra challenge for you whereby you can make your own pasta to go with your spaghetti bolognese. Do go and check out the menu and the place settings so that you can design your own menu and place settings if you want to make a themed meal of your dish. And finally, do stay tuned, because next I'm going to show you how you can dice an onion like a proper chef. So welcome to week 1 of our pro cooking chef skills, and today we are going to be looking at how you chop an onion. Now the first thing to do is, you can often find this rooty bit at the end of the onion, is to carefully cut the rooty bit off, but not the entire root. So you're just kind of cutting the dirty bit off the end, but what you want to do is make sure that you're actually keeping the root intact, because that's going to stop the onion splitting when you come to chop it. Then what we're going to do is we're going to chop the top of the onion, and then we're going to carefully peel away its papery outside so that we're ready to do our chopping. Now make sure, as always, that you're being super careful with that knife. Now once we've got our onion peeled, what we're going to do is we're going to carefully cut it in half, and we're going to put one to the side because we're just going to chop one half to start with. Now you need to be super careful when you're using your knife, and you need to keep your fingers well away from that knife. So the best way to do it is to make sure that as you're chopping, you're tucking those fingers under and you're using your knuckle almost as a guide. Now we're going to turn the onion so that the root is pointing outwards, and we're going to start by making some slices through the onion, but what we're going to do is make sure that we're not going all the way through to that root, as you can see. Now if you need to, as you're getting towards the end, you can anchor that onion a little bit with your fingers, making sure they're away from that knife. And then what you're going to do is you're going to carefully, and you may need an adult to help, is you're going to cut towards the back, so from the front to the back. Now if you have a really thick onion, you may wish to do a couple of horizontal slices, and then again, keeping those fingers well out, you're going to then cut across to make some nicely diced onion. When you get to the end, it can often feel a little bit unstable. So if you rotate the onion so the root is pointing up to the sky, you can then cut down and then cut to the side so that all you're left with is a root. Now, if you feel that your onion isn't quite chopped as finely as you would like, you could always, using a rocking motion and your fingers on top of the onion, you can always go through a few more times in order to get that onion finely chopped. And then you have perfectly chopped onion. Thank you so much for joining me this week. I have had lots of fun cooking our perfect pasta, and I'm sure you have too. Don't forget to head over to Facebook and share your amazing dishes in order to be in with a chance of winning one of our top 5 prizes of the week, where each person who wins receives a limited edition Twinkl Plate Up pin badge. I will see you next week for our Creative Curry Week. Happy cooking, and I'll see you soon. So today we're going to be chopping an onion. Chop, chop, chop.